What's up guys, my name is Sean from White Jade Productions, and if you read the title you know, this video is about what gear you need to start a production company. Now I've been freelancing for a very long time, however I did start my production company just about this time last year, and I've been going full-time in it ever since, and I haven't looked back. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about what gear specifically you need to make a profitable production company without any holes and any missteps, all the stuff you're gonna need for different kinds of jobs. It's gonna be a bit of a longer video, but we're gonna go through it, and it's not as expensive as you might think. Now, with anything, you can buy things that are more expensive or cheaper. This video is simply telling you guys what I did and how I make running a production company full-time work for me, and maybe teach you something on how you can do it for you. First things first is a camera. I think this goes without saying, but you are gonna need one. Now, this is the Lumix S5. This wasn't my first camera, however, it was my first big jump camera. Now, if you're gonna shoot a lot of slow motion, I might recommend another camera. This camera does do up to 180 frames a second in 1080p, but you need a lot of light to do it. If it's dark, it won't look too great. However, for everything else, it does phenomenally. I've had some subscribers of the channel say that they have bought these for around 500 euros over in the United Kingdom, which apparently most of you guys who watch my videos are from the UK. So I'm gonna start incorporating a little bit more of their prices into my videos. However, if you're stateside like me, you can typically find this anywhere from $650 all the way up to $900 if it comes with a lens, which isn't too bad. It's a pretty good deal. However, the thing you're gonna need next is these memory cards. Now, I have some Lexar memory cards. People hate on Lexar. I've never had an issue personally. They work great. However, they can be very, very expensive. These are the things you don't want to cheap out on. And I have two of them. This has two dual card slots, so I get to put two in my camera. If you can, get a camera that has dual card slots. It is nice to have that security. However, as long as you're taking care of your cards and running first aid on them every once in a while and repairing them and reformatting them before every single shoot, you should never have an issue. I've never had a card that I owned fail on me. However, I have had a single instance where a card failed on me, but it wasn't my card, it wasn't my camera, and it wasn't my computer I was plugging it into, so I don't feel too bad about that one, but don't cheap out on your memory cards. Now, of course, I also have a cage on here. A cage allows you to build some things out, and I'll show you why that's useful. This goes right into my next point. You have two battery options. One is very popular, however, you don't necessarily have to do it, and I don't do it all the time. Right now, I have a top handle. Boom, it's attached. Sorry if that hit the mic, it might have, but I can put a V-mount battery on the back, which is great because now I can power my camera via the V-mount. Or I could take this whole rig off, ditch the V-mount, and just run a top handle, but this is a nice battery, and it runs this rig for 8 hours straight. I can leave this camera on and shoot for just about 8 hours straight and it won't ever die. However, you can also just add more of these tiny batteries, which depending on the camera you use might be good. If you're running a Sony camera or a Canon camera, their batteries do not last long at all, so that might not be the move. However, if you use Nikon or Lumix, this might be the way to go. I used to run big V-mount setups all the time on my mirrorless cameras, but I have since stopped just because I find that I don't need to, because the tiny batteries that fit in here will run this camera for 2.5 or 3 hours at any given time. And so I maybe need to battery swap once or twice during a given shoot. Of course, batteries are absolutely useless without a lens. Boom, now we have a lens on. Now, picking the right lens isn't necessarily easy. I have a lot of lenses. It's where I've invested most of my money. Getting a good camera is all and well, but getting great lenses matters a whole lot more. Currently, I'm shooting this video on a Sigma 24-70 2.8, which is the lens I would recommend for everybody. And don't buy one used. Go on eBay, go on Adorama, go on any used gear site. Please get one used. The older lenses, they're fine. They work great. They've always worked great. Everybody loves newer and faster autofocus, but it's fine. However, if you're gonna run a production company, I do suggest that you learn to pull manually, which is why I use a lot of Nikon lenses on my Lumix camera, which I know seems a little odd. However, Nikon makes really good, fast, and cheap glass that just works. So this is a Nikon 85mm 1.8 G lens. It has a beautiful swirl. I shoot on the 50mm a lot. Here's some shots from that. Love these lenses. These lenses go anywhere from $100 to $300 on eBay in really good or even brand new condition, sometimes with their original packaging. That's just a good deal. And if you're gonna run a production company, you're gonna have a lot of expenses. Might as well get really good glass from another company and just manually pull focus, whether that's with your hand straight from the barrel, which I don't really recommend, or with a follow focus. Either way is great. However, if you're gonna be pulling manually, you're gonna need a monitor, which I do suggest you get anyways. Now, picking the right monitor isn't really easy. I have had 3 or 4 monitors at this point, and I've tried a lot of others, including the Atomos Shinobi and their Ninja 5, which I do like, but I have my complaints with. I personally think they're incredibly overpriced for what they offer. Currently, the monitor I like using with this rig is my Andy Cine 5-inch monitor. This sucker is an aluminum alloy build. It's got fans in it. They're completely silent. It has all the features I need. It's relatively cheap and very robust and very bright, so I can shoot outside all day long and not have an issue. I love this monitor. I love putting it right on top of my camera because when I shoot mirrorless, I tend to like to make the rig real small. Making an oversized rig isn't really my deal. That's what I have an actual cinema camera for. This is for my other stuff. However, when you're starting out, you might want to rig this out a little bit more with top handles and such, but I do recommend just keeping it light. Of course, always do your own research into the gear that you need. If you shoot a lot of sports, maybe having a brighter monitor is better. However, if you shoot in more controlled environments, maybe get a monitor that has more features and less brightness and go that route. Preferably, you should always be having a monitor that has good focus peaking and good false colors, and usually a few other features such as custom anamorphic control, which we're gonna get into next. Now, if you've been following this channel for any period of time, you know I love anamorphic, and if you want to be shooting anamorphic stuff, there are 2 routes you can take. One is an adapter. From a financial standpoint, this is a better call. In fact, I'd argue generally, this is a better call. You can choose your taking lens. Yes, you might not have as good close focus. You might have slightly more chromatic aberrations, but you can get faster glass on here and you can choose your look a little bit more. However, there are alternative routes such as Sirui and Blazar. Now, I do have the Blazar Remus. I like these lenses. They're great lenses. I use them all the time. They're cinema lenses through and through. I have mine in PL mount, so I can use it with RE cameras as well as my Red and Sony Cine Alta cameras, but I have an adapter to throw it on my Lumix camera as well if need be. Very useful. I love this lens. It's not for everybody. They are expensive, and I wouldn't recommend somebody starting a production company to buy one of these. If you have other expenses, I'd worry about lighting, grip, and just building out your rig and, you know, your bank account as well a little bit more than spending $1,200 on a lens. It's a lot of cash to give up for a single lens. I don't necessarily know if that's wise. However, if you're shooting a lot in the music video space or the commercial space, I might recommend these, especially the music video space. If you do a lot of music videos or that's what you want to do as a production company, maybe grab a set of these. It might be worth it for you. But if you don't want to spend that much money, this is the Sirui anamorphic adapter. I personally love it. Gives me a widescreen look straight out of the gate. When paired with certain lenses, it gives a very anamorphic look. I'd argue even more so than the Blazar Remus. It's very beautiful. I like this adapter, but again, that choice is up to you. So you've built out your camera rig and gotten all your accessories on, and now you're wondering what to do next because maybe that part of the video didn't apply to you because you already have all this stuff. So what do you do next? Well, having a nice camera rig is all in good, but the most important aspect is lighting, of course. And I'm currently lighting myself with an Aperture Amaran 60X. It's a bicolor light, not super powerful, but I have a softbox on and that makes all the difference. I use this light for like 90% of my work. And when I'm not using that light, I'm using the Aperture Amaran 100D. Now, any light from 60 all the way up to 300 watts is gonna do most of your legwork. I would recommend getting a 100D. It's just a more powerful light for interview setups, especially if you're putting your subject against a window. You have to have it. However, it's not necessary. I know, I just said you have to have it and it's not necessary. in the same sentence. But it really just depends on what you do, because I like doing something interesting as a production company. If somebody hires me for a job and I don't have the gear required to do that job, I will take a cut of my pay from that job, whatever my deposit is, and I'll take that money and go buy the gear I need. So say, for example, somebody wants to hire you to do a bunch of interviews and you don't have any lights. Well, make sure whatever deposit you get for that job, say it's a $3,000 job, make sure you get $300 for your deposit and put that into one good light or two good used lights, and maybe a softbox. But if you don't have a softbox, there are plenty of other alternatives such as bed sheets and shower curtains. Just make sure you get stands to support it all and get that deposit and put it into the gear you need for that shoot, because that's how you grow. Me and a lot of my friends in this professional creative working space tend to do that a lot. When we get hired for a job that we don't necessarily have all the gear that we need for it, we either rent it, or we use the deposit to buy it, or we just go ahead and buy it outright from our own bank accounts just to make sure we have that gear. We make money off of that interview job, and then we advertise that we do interviews, and then we do more interview jobs with the gear that we bought for that first one. It's a really good idea. You don't have to buy gear that you're worried you'll never use, but at the same time, when you do need gear, you can just rent or buy it. And if you're worried about practicing with that gear, I'd suggest renting it to practice with it. It's not too expensive, and you could probably create a cool little short film out of it over a weekend if you really wanted, or see if any of your friends have gear that you might like to try out and use and ask them if you can borrow it. It's a great way to practice, learn, and grow, as well as collaborate with other filmmakers. Now, before we move on from more of the technical aspect into some business and creative things, I do want to talk about multiple camera setups. I personally think if you're going to run a production company, you need at least 2 cameras, if not 3. Now, I didn't start off with multiple cameras. It's hard to afford multiple cameras. I get it. It's taken me 8 years to own multiple cameras and multiple lights and build out all I needed to run a production company. However, it is possible, and my suggestion would be, if you have a job where you need multiple cameras, bring a friend along, pay them what you can, pay them for their time, and more importantly, their camera. If not their time, at least rent their camera. Even if it's a different brand, that's totally fine. Practice color matching. You'll get better at it. You can make it work. Just spend some time with it. However, multiple cameras at some point when running a production company is a necessity. I personally use Red and Lumix for all of my video work. I find that their colors look similar enough that it's very easy to match them, as well as Lumix just has this very organic feel to it. While Red isn't the most organic, because the Lumix cameras don't have OLPFs in them, at least mine doesn't, I find that the OLPF in the Red and the lack of an OLPF in my Lumix tend to match up pretty well and give a similar feel as well as look. If you're not gonna buy cameras from the same brand, like a lot of people like to use Sony, for example, just because you can have an FX3 or an FX30 as well as an FX6 or FX9. You can pair those up very easily, which good job for Sony for building that out. Same deal with Canon. You can do the same with Lumix. You can't really do the same with Nikon. There are seldom brands that really allow that. However, I do want to say that if you find a good deal on 2 cameras from opposing brands, you can use those. Real quick, I want to talk about the most important aspect of owning a company, and that is being comfy. Now, you gotta have a good chair. If you don't have a good chair, you're gonna be uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, then you're not gonna work well, you're not gonna get stuff done, and you're not gonna get paid. This right here is my personal favorite desk chair, the Odin Lake L1. Quick disclaimer, Odin Lake did send me this chair out, and it turns out I loved it. Personally, my back starts to hurt and my legs start to hurt a lot when I sit down in an uncomfy chair for too long, and it's really, really annoying. But this chair is different. This chair allows me to sit and work for hours at a time without being uncomfortable, and it honestly does let me get a lot more done. Not to mention, it's got a few cool features such as the lumbar support support, which helps me retain a good posture while I'm working, as well as a headrest for when I just want to lay back, which one of my favorite features is actually the locks. So I can lock my chair back so it doesn't want to push forward on me, but at the same time, if I'm working really hard, I can sit up straight, lock it, so when I push back on my chair, it pushes back on me, and I can retain that good posture. This chair is genuinely adjustable in every single way you can imagine. The headrest is adjustable, the seat is adjustable forward and back, the armrests are adjustable in every way you want, including that lumbar support as well to make sure you are as comfy as possible. Not to mention, the whole chair is built out of this extremely high quality mesh, which allows you to be cool even in the summertime. However, it stays strong and tight, retaining that original new out of the box feel for its whole life. If you want to check out Odin Lake, specifically this chair or any of their other high quality studio desk chairs, go to the link in my description, check it out. They're awesome. I'd recommend any of these chairs to anybody, whether you're a working professional in the field or you just happen to sit at a desk for a lot and you need a comfy chair that you can sit in without getting tired. Back to the main video. Moving on from the technical side, getting jobs is important. You can have all the gear in the world, but if you don't know how to advertise yourself, then you're not gonna book anything at all. I suggest having business cards, and quality business cards at that. People like to shy away from quality business cards because they are expensive. I think I paid $100 for my last order of business cards, but I hand them out like hotcakes and it gets me jobs. Think of it this way. If you're gonna pay $100 for 75 really nice business cards, make sure they're thick, make sure they're double-sided so that you have access to more information, or at least the person you're handing it to does. Make sure you have your name, very simple on the front, tells what you do. Your actual name, not just your production company name, your actual name should be on the back. You should treat your production company as somebody who hires you, not necessarily you, because people you hand these to don't necessarily know that. Should have your occupation. I suggest putting a QR code or link to your website, your phone number, and your email. People need to get in contact with you. People need to see your work. I'd also suggest using Instagram handles on there if that's where you have a primary portfolio. However, having a website is an absolute must. Me personally, I will not hire anybody to work for my production company, freelance or part-time, if they don't have a website. A website's a must. If you don't have a website, I don't see you as professional, and clients view that the exact same way. People won't hire you for jobs if they don't see you as professional. Having a website, even if it doesn't seem super great, is a good idea. There's no sponsorship here for a website. Personally, I use Format. I would avoid places like Wix and Squarespace. However, they can work and I have used them before. It's just a very beginner place to start, and you're probably gonna wanna move on from it down the road. Check out my website, whitejadeproductions.org. There is a link in the description if you want to see an example of a website. I'm not necessarily saying it's a great one, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the right style for you. However, it's what I do and it brings me in a lot of money. So I might suggest stealing my style a little bit. It's not going to hurt me. If you want to copy me or copy somebody else, by all means, go for it. Imitation is the purest form of flattery, so I certainly don't mind. Even if you're a subscriber of mine, you might not know most of my work is actually in sound design and editing and not cinematography. While cinematography is a large chunk of how I make my money, I tend to also be editing, coloring, and sound designing the projects I'm also filming. So there's a bit more work on that back end, and I also get hired professionally to sound design and edit TV shows, trailers, and movies as well. Now, a few years ago, the industry standard was Premiere Pro for editing. That's what everybody used to use, mostly because that's what universities paid for. However, DaVinci Resolve over the past few years has quickly taken over the professional market, including Hollywood as well. It is becoming more popular as an editor. It has always reigned supreme as a coloring software. In fact, I'd argue Premiere Pro isn't really even a coloring software, but that's a whole other video. However, I find that most projects work better when I edit, color, and sound design all within DaVinci Resolve, and it's cheap. DaVinci Resolve is $295. And that is cheaper than what you're gonna pay for Premiere Pro in like 2 or 3 years. It's ridiculous. Premiere Pro is expensive. I think it's not as good. There are a few things about it I like. I like it better as an NLE. I like it better as an editor. I don't like it better for anything else. And transferring projects over from Premiere to Resolve to either color or sound design is an absolute nightmare. I hate it, and that's why the industry is kind of starting to shift away from it. Despite that, if you have to use Premiere Pro or you currently have it, it is fine to keep using. I'm not saying it's an awful software. Same deal with Final Cut Pro. I personally started editing actually in the GoPro software editing app. That's where I started my whole journey. I started editing there. Then I moved over to iMovie. Then I moved over to Final Cut Pro. Then I went to Premiere. Then I went to Resolve. I've used just about every editing software there is out there, including some of the more obscure ones like Avid Media Composer, which personally not my favorite, but hey, do your own thing. I find that Resolve is just going to be the best bang for your buck. If you run on Mac or you run on iPad, then I find that it's gonna handle your files the best. And I just generally find that its features are a little more mobile friendly. So if you have to be out and about editing on a plane or in a car or anywhere but your house, I find that Resolve is just gonna work better for you. Also, it live saves and it doesn't crash. Well, not that it doesn't crash. It certainly does, but you don't lose anything when that happens, unlike a certain Premiere app. Now, editing software is all in good, and I think I've said my piece about DaVinci Resolve and why it's better. But what about your editing space? Well, I'm in my studio right now, and I've built it out to work specifically for what I do. I have sound blankets on this wall. I have sound blankets on the wall behind the camera. I have stuff stacked in the corners as bass traps. It's not super sound isolated. However, when I need to do some serious sound designing, I usually go to an actual dub stage or mixing suite. However, for here, this works great for me. You don't really have to sound isolate your room. And if you don't have the money for studio monitors or sound isolation, or you aren't even sure that you're gonna be somewhere permanently enough to set up that stuff, then I'd suggest get 2 or 3 pairs of headphones. The first pair of headphones I'd recommend are just these typical Sony headphones. You'll see almost everybody using these. These are just an industry standard. Technically the name is the MDR 7506. I was given these when I was in college, and I do love them. They're good. I've used them a lot on set. I've used them a lot just doing stuff for other people. Whenever I go into a studio to record tracks for an artist, or I'm there to score something for a film, these are always lying around. You should get yourself a pair of these just because other people will probably be listening on the same headphones, and that's pretty rare these days that somebody would be listening on the same speakers that you're using. So if you're gonna be mixing stuff, get a pair of these. But also, I would suggest getting a pair of open back headphones. It doesn't have to be this pair, I'm getting them tangled up now, but these are the Beyerdynamic DT990 Pros. These are open back headphones, meaning that, well, they don't have a back, it's open. It allows for a wider stereo field so you can hear what's going on around you a little bit better. Cons are you're gonna need to be in a quiet place to use these because they let all the audio in. If you put them on your head, things get slightly quieter around you. I would say even like original AirPods without noise cancellation have better sound isolation than these do. Just a warning, but they sound great and I suggest everybody get a pair. Now, while we're on the topic of sound, get yourself a mic. This is a Deity S Mic 2. I have used this performing live, miking up banjos. I've mic'd up guitars with this. I also use this for sports. I use this for interviews, and I use this for my YouTube videos from time to time. It's a phenomenal sounding mic. Mics are expensive, but again, if you're gonna be doing interview stuff or you need a shotgun or you're gonna do any on-set audio recording, please, please, please get yourself a high quality mic. Don't cheap out. Same vein of thought, get yourself some wireless mics too. These will come in super handy. I think I'm using the Hollyland something. I don't really know what they are. There's these little button mics. Get the small ones. Don't get the large, like square ones. They look ugly and they're stupid. Generally, I would hide these, but it's a YouTube video, so I don't care. Having wireless mics is very, very useful. You'll need them a lot. Something else I also highly recommend is getting some of these mini tube lights. You have some back there. I love these things. They're nice, easy to power on. They have multiple modes. Let's see, we can do HSI. We got a party mode, hold on. What else we got? Oh, we got a broken light bulb. Strobe lights, RGB strobe, paparazzi, emergency. What we got? Red flash, green flash, blue flash. I think we even got a cop car. Oh, there we are. Cop cars. Ain't that cool? Now, having lights like this are incredibly useful. Say I want to give myself a rim light, put it over the side, cast a little glow over the side of my face. I use these all the time. These are from Neewer. Super nice, kind of cheap, not super bright. I love quasars. They're kind of my go-to lights. However, they can be kind of expensive, but I'd say getting yourself a tube light or two is a move as far as lighting goes. I meant to mention that earlier, so I'm mentioning it now. Here we go. This is the DJI RS2. Technically, with how they used to name things, this would be the RS2 Pro. If you're thinking of the Neewer gimbal in its terms, it's a great gimbal. I think I paid $250 for this, and it holds my red. It'll hold an FX6 on it. It'll more than hold your mirrorless camera. It's an absolute beast. You don't need the newer gimbals. $250 for a gimbal is not bad, especially when the new ones are going for $1,000. Get an older gimbal if you don't have the money, but please get a gimbal. Learn how to use it. They are a learning experience. They are a learning process, but you can make some phenomenal shots with a gimbal. I'll throw up some examples right now if I haven't been. They just make your shots look cinematic. And if you don't want to be lugging around a tripod, it does allow you to get tripod-like shots. If you're just standing still, you can just pan and you can tilt. It's just very useful, not to mention with the DJI ones, which I do heavily advocate for. You can have control cables and wireless follow focus, I guess. So I guess it's not wireless, but you don't have to pull like this. So if you're doing manual, you can use the scroll wheel on the front. If you're not doing manual follow focus, you can change this to your ISO or your shutter speed or whatever else you want to control the camera. Incredibly useful. I highly recommend it. That's all I have for today's video, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to answer. Like I said, I've only been doing this for a year, running a production company. This is just my experience, but I am doing it full time, so I think I'm credible enough to speak on this topic. However, I don't know everything, so if you have any tips, also leave them down below. Until next time.